Alright, I think we are recording. So, today we're going to try something a little bit different. For the last couple of weeks, I've been doing videos that sort of describe my process, but today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different, and I am going to be doing an illustration. So for those of you who aren't aware, I recently released a game called Unsafe, and the game follows a young boy who wakes up in a school, or in his school, as he, well, right after a car crash. So he now has to figure out exactly what's going on and how he ended up there. And through the game, you sort of realize, okay, what's actually going on and where, why is he where he ended up? And the game is sort of relatively dark. The game actually did pretty well, I think, like decently well, and that made me want to continue on in that vein of creating video games. But creating video games actually takes a while, not surprisingly, and I wanted to be able to still upload videos regularly while still making these video games. And I found that making video games actually takes up a lot more of my time than I thought it would, especially with a full-time job. So the videos ended up being sort of falling by the wayside, and I thought that was a bit of a bummer. So today I'm going to be doing something that I'd be doing anyways, which is creating some concept art for one of the characters for the follow-up to Unsafe Chapter 2. This particular character is sort of my main monster design. So what I have here is sort of the outline of his silhouette, but I am not loving this, so I'm actually going to delete it and try again. I actually do have a sketch right here that I'm working off of. So I'm sort of trying to add some color, see if I can make this a little bit more alive, as it were. I think I might want to go in a different direction and choose a color. So unlike Chapter 1 or Chapter 2, what I'm doing next is I'm remaking Chapter 1, and Chapter 1 is supposed to be dark in a different way from Chapter 2. Chapter 2 was very much about xenophobia and exactly how cruel people can be to one another. Chapter 2, the remake of Chapter 1 is more about the family unit and exactly how that sort of, how cruelty happens within the family unit. So I'm trying to create a character here that's going to be sort of my main villain. Now, there's not going to be any actual combat in the Chainbroke. Not the Chainbroke, sorry, in Unsafe. I don't know if this is a general thing for the entirety of the Chainbroke. Sorry, again, I'm mixing up my games. I don't know if this is going to be something that's going to be for the entirety of Unsafe, but I do know that for the beginnings, at the very least, of this game, I want for there to be no combat. For Chapter 1, it just doesn't really make sense. And a big part of the experience of making video games when you're creating these worlds is that you want for it to make sense. So for those of you who saw a couple of days ago, I uploaded a sort of a tech demo test of something that had this like tumescent situation happening in its head, and I kind of like this sort of tumorish situation of a character that, the head is never supposed to actually stand still or be at any point, a still situation. Is going to be ever moving, ever changing, and preferably I actually would like for it to not, for the player to not really ever see this character's face. Preferably, I don't know if that's going to be something that's actually going to happen, but I would like for that to be the case. I can't say if, as it is with development, it's really difficult to say how things exactly are going to roll out as you're developing it, because sometimes you're going to discover something that's super cool. Sometimes things just don't work out. That's sort of the nature of the beast when it comes to video game development, especially indie game development, which is, I mean, if you have an actual a budget, you can actually take your time and create exactly the thing you're looking for. But when you're an indie dev, you basically just have to, I don't know, go with the flow, I guess is the right word for it. Like, if something's working out, great. If it isn't, you just sort of have to say, well, I tried it. So this, by the way, I'm calling the monster Bobblehead for obvious reasons. And I kind of like this sort of very disgusting thing he's got going on. By the way, it is a he, and I kind of want for him to be, a little bit gross. That's sort of the look we're going for today. Is sort of this disgusting, disfigured situation. For Unsafe, most of my monster designs are derived, if not, let's not say derived, more inspired by Silent Hill, the original trilogy. I heard somebody say that Silent Hill is gamers' version of Star Wars, in that the original, everybody loved the original trilogy and nobody's getting behind the new stuff. I really loved PT, which was sort of supposed to be a reimagining or a reawakening for the Silent Hill series, and then that was cancelled, and that sucked. God, I really wanted to play that game. I have this one really large friend he's Icelandic and he's big. He's sort of my friend group's version of the Mountain from Game of Thrones, and we were playing PT together, and throughout the entire thing, he was clutching a throw pillow I had, just like so scared. It was sort of the best. I kept asking people while playing that game if somebody else wanted to take the controller. We were playing it in a small group, and not surprisingly, nobody did. That was not something that people were like, "Yay, I want to take the controller." It was so goddamn scary, and I loved it. There are some really good Let's Plays out there for those of you who haven't played it, and I would very much recommend that you seek those out, because the game is just such an experience. I know everybody was super excited for the collaboration of Guillermo del Toro and Hideo Kojima, but actually what really excited me about that project was that Junji Ito, a somewhat infamous horror illustrator, was going to be working on that game. And I caught one of his Tomy comics back in 2008 or 9, and it's so disturbing. It's really great. He's one of those, he tackles a lot of bizarre horror. There is this situation where I think horror is usually at its best if you never fully understand what's going on. Once you completely 100% understand it, it's no longer horrifying. Once a threat is, manageable, it's no longer really all that scary. So I really like Junji Ito in that he creates these worlds where the thing is rarely manageable. It's rarely survivable. And that's just so fucking awesome. So yeah, the Bubblehead that I'm working on here is sort of supposed to take a little bit of inspiration, I guess, from Junji Ito, but not overly much. I think a big part of this particular uh, thing is that it's supposed to just be gross. You know, you're gonna meet this guy in Unsafe Chapter 2. Like, I don't quite know when or how. That's the thing about games development. Right now, I'm really just working on what is the mechanic going to be around this guy. Like, how is he gonna factor in? How is our protagonist going to, manage the threat of this guy? A big thing I think with this dude specifically is I don't want for there to be a combat mechanic. So in that way, it's not like the original Silent Hills. I don't want there to be a combat mechanic because I feel like a lot of the scariest games or the scariest experiences are the ones that tackle with a world in which you can't do anything about the threat. It's just sort of there. The best you can do is manage it. And if you think about the scariest situation that you've been in real life, it's rarely something where aggression is called for. It's usually just, try and, hold on for dear life until the threat sort of leaves on its own accord. And I feel like that's something that's, well, it's not missing in games as such. I mean, there have been really, really great games that have played around with this particular dynamic. A classic example, of course, is Amnesia: The Dark Descent, but there are also some great examples in Alien Isolation. I mean, it's not exactly a new thing to gaming, but this sort of situation where a player becomes defenseless, or at least where you move away from sort of classic modes of defense that games have taught us, which is basically aggression for the most part, we start seeing, we start coming into something that's a little bit more interesting as a gaming experience, to me at least. So, the guy here, I'm just zooming out to get a better sense. Yeah, he needs a little bit more roundness to the head. So I am going to go in and I think play around with a couple of different colors. I actually don't do a lot of concept art anymore. I used to really, really enjoy concept art and want to be a concept artist, as I think I've mentioned on this channel before. But I've found that concept art tends to get in the way of creating games. And that sounds weird because a lot of people have this idea that creating video games is really like 90% concept art. It's like 90% asset creation, actually. I do a lot of asset creation. Oh, that looks so gross. I'm super into it. I really, really like putting in like a lot of disgusting colors. We just need to, sorry, got lost there for a second. No, yeah, like 90% of creating video games is asset creation. I think anyone who's done some video game development can tell you that creating like the animations and the sound design, like there's a lot of things that go into creating video games, and you sort of more or less just have to hang in there for like a huge part of it, because tedium is a real part of it. Project fatigue, especially. I have personally been working on the Chain Broke for just over a year now, and well, yeah, project fatigue on that one is a real thing. I'm starting to be like, is this thing ever gonna end? I know it is, and I'm gonna be proud of myself once I finish it, regardless of how it turns out. but right now it feels just on the fun side of endless. So right now I'm trying to play around with this idea of an accent color on this side of our character, just to light up some of those bulbs on his head a little bit more, just to see what that's going to give us. Again, this is concept art, so this is not promotional art. I think there's a common misconception that concept and promotional art are the same thing. A lot of the times when you see what's known as what they call concept art, like, look, there's a new piece of concept art for the new Halo or whatever, it's mostly actual promotional art. This means that they've had a concept art artist usually do an illustration that they just work on for a slightly longer time than they would a piece of concept art. Concept art is mostly just these like quick sketches to give you a sense of what exactly exactly what you're looking for from a character. Like for instance here, I'm not going in and doing like every individual bulb with like super detailed. I'm more trying to give myself just like a basic sense of what this thing is going to look like. I'm really digging the redness of it. I'm having a few issues right in this area up here, but I'm really digging like how red it is. So once I leave this space and go into Unity again, I'm going to be able to like have a sense of exactly what I'm trying to create. Of course, this is like I can tell you right now, the thing that I'm making with the head is going to be made with the Unity particle system, a really good tool for those of you who are Unity developers. But because it's made with the Unity particle system, I'm going to have to be a little bit wary of ooh, that was a bit too much. I have to be wary of exactly how I'm going to do this. For instance, how am I going to make the redness on the bottom of my character? And if any of you watching this are Unity developers, I'm sure you're typing like, oh, there are like 50 different ways. And yes, there are. I have to figure out which one I'm the most into. Was that adding just what a bit? No, I actually kind of think that works. So I'm gonna try and see if this works sort of luminescent. Out of glow. Oh, and go in and just give us that color. Take the opacity down just a touch. Yeah, that's really gross. That's really gross. That's exactly what I want. So again, this is concept art. This is very much not meant to be something that promotes the game. It's supposed to be something so that I have a reference point once I start working on the working on this effect. So I'm going to try and see if I can make this torso a little bit grosser, because you sort of want for him to feel just like I'm not going to go into exactly who this guy is, although I do know who he is and I do know what I want for him to be. But honestly, the game is going to come out eventually, and I really want for people to discover on their own who this guy is. He's never going to shed the bubbles. That's always going to be sort of his defining trait. It's not like a Scooby-Doo episode where he sheds the bubbles, and all of a sudden you realize it was the mayor all along. That's not a thing that's gonna happen. Not in this game. I try and make my sort of mission statement, if you will, with Unsafe is to make something that's going to disturb and disgust, but hopefully also incite conversations. The last one had the homosexual theme to it. As I mentioned in my last big video, I am homosexual, but that was not why I created it. It's not meant to be. A lot of people assumed that it was an autobiographical piece, Unsafe Chapter 2, and it wasn't. But I do live in a news cycle where I notice these I don't want to say trends, but unfortunately that's what they are. These sort of attacks on a certain group of people, in this case homosexuals. And I felt like there was something there that just wasn't really being discussed so much. So I wanted to, put in my 2 cents, as it were. Allow for people to have that conversation. So here I'm trying to add in some freckles. And I want for the pen pressure, is that gonna? Nope, that's not gonna give me what I want. Jitter? No. Oh, I can't remember how you get it to rotate weirdly. Dual brush? No. Nope. Nope. Okay, so I'm just gonna add in a little bit of freckling around here. Would it make sense for these to be freckled as well? And make the tool. Nah, I'm not really digging that. I am going to outline this particular character insofar as he lives in a world where everything is outlined. That's sort of the style of the chain of Unsafe. So I'm going to stay within that style. I'm just going to pink it up a bit. There we are. A little bit pink. And we're just going to take that out. And what you'll notice is once I start, I'm actually going to start outlining now. What you'll notice is once I start outlining, there she is, a lot of things are going to happen with the, I won't say quality, but it's gonna add a dimension to the work. So this particular outline style actually came from the very first version of Unsafe, which I'm just going to go in here on the, where did I put my, there, brush settings. So you can see it's a little bit, there you are. That works better for me. Just going to take it down. Sorry. This outline style actually came from the original Unsafe, where I wanted to, which was created in late 2015, early 2016, and at the time, I was really into this idea of making something a little bit more cartoony, because I'd been working on something that was outlined less, and it sort of kicked my ass a little bit. So I wanted to try and make something that just wasn't quite so faithful to reality. What happened with the first version of Unsafe, and I encourage you to look it up because it's a great cautionary tale. Was that I simply bit off more than I could chew. I did not have the skills to complete that game at all, and it sort of ended up a buggy mess. Not because it was a bad game, but because I gave up. I just gave up, and I ended up putting out something that needed like months more work. But I was so tired by then that I just went, fuck it, let's just put this out. And I always regretted that. I always regretted that choice of just putting something out because I felt like I had to because I'd been working on it for so long. And that's why when I played the South Korean game Detention, and I saw how they really successfully did something that was just so uncomfortable, I sort of realized, you know what? There's a way to do now what I wasn't able to do then. There's a way of making that sort of uncomfortable experience that I always wanted to make, in a way that's going to speak to that. Why is the smoothing so high? In a way that's really going to make the experience just and that's one of the reasons why I'm continuing on with this particular game, because for those of you who don't know, I've been working on the game The Chain Broke, the one that I've been name dropping a couple of times here through sheer Freudian slips, and one should really, I mean, it's very much up to how you like to work, but it's never the best idea to start several projects at once. I did this time because I've been working on The Chain Broke for so long, and I just needed a break. And then it just turned out like I wanted it, really. So I started to work a bit more on that. So now I don't know if that's... So that took a bit longer than I wanted it to, but I'm just trying to figure out if that's really cool or not. I think it might be okay. I think it might be okay. So I'm just gonna try and see if I can speed up the process a bit here, with these bulbs, whatever you want to call them. One of the reasons that I really like Silent Hill, I'm particularly fond of the second one, and if you ever want a crash course in why that's an amazing game, there are some really good breakdowns on YouTube of exactly why this game, Silent Hill 2, is so amazing. And it really is. I mean, they sort of wrote the book on what video game horror is, by just making it so uncomfortable. I played that game when I was 17 or so, and it remains in my top 10 of all time because it's so successfully makes you both root for and hate your protagonist. Something I tried to do with Unsafe Chapter 1, and I may have done I may have been a wee bit too successful in that regard. So let's just see if I can make these bubbles a little bit more disgusting. Yeah, so that game really, I think, defined what video game horror could be, but was never fully surpassed, surprisingly, in the some 20-odd years. Really, 20? 15 at least, odd years since that game came out. We haven't seen anybody truly take up the mantle that was left by that game. A lot of games have tried, but I think because we as game developers have been a little bit too preoccupied with violence, we tend to try and make games that create the violence that was there for the original Silent Hill. The unfortunate thing here being that you really can't. What Silent Hill did so well was sort of describe a sensation of unease that happened in that town. So I'm just trying something there. Yeah. So you see, one of the things I noticed here is I'm really just playing around with colors and shapes. And oh, see there, I did a mistake. I'm really just trying to play around with colors and shapes here. What you may have noticed is I kind of found the main shape relatively quickly, and now it's really just trying to figure out, okay, with that shape, how am I going to sort of develop that into something that's disgusting. I really like what I did up here with these veins that are running up the thing, so it sort of works out pretty well. So I'm gonna see if I can't put in a few more of those and maybe make this a little bit. That was too small. That was too big. Let's go with a 4, and there we are. So I feel like something like this might work out in my favor. Yeah. So what I was saying was I'm really just playing around with shapes, trying to figure out how do I make something that sort of captures the disgusting essence of this creature, because he's sort of supposed to give you that like disgusting feel, not unlike Pyramid Head, but whereas Pyramid Head was sort of a representation of James' guilt from that game, this guy has a very different point of view, if you will. That's one of the reasons that I really liked Silent Hill 2 as well, is that it played around with this idea that a monster can be more than just a monster in a video game. Like, so often in video games, the thing that we're, destroying is an alien or so many human beings. Good God, I am so sick of murder simulators. But that was beside the point. Usually the threat is tangible. And what happened when you played against Pyramid Head was it was never fully tangible. For instance, was it one thing or were there several Pyramid Heads? Why was Pyramid Head so scary? Why did Pyramid Head take up so much of the space in that game? And why could you never fully deal with the threat? One of the reasons that Pyramid Head really worked, I think, was that it sort of spoke to that sense of you were never fully able to deal with the threat. You were able to manage it for a time. One of the things I think, I'm going to say Konami here because I actually don't know who made these decisions, so I'm just going to refer to the company. One of the things that I think Konami misunderstood when it came to Pyramid Head was exactly why it was scary. It wasn't scary because it had a pyramid for a head. It was basically a man with a bucket on his head. It's not exactly scary by itself. It was scary because you never fully knew where you had it. There were times when that creature would pop up on screen and not be violent at all. There were times when you had to sort of go around relative to aggressively deal with the thing. And in their later designs on the Silent Hill franchise, they tried to recreate that experience with Pyramid Head by creating random monsters that worked in sort of the same Nemesis capacity. monsters that would come back and resurface, but they never fully had that Pyramid Head-ish experience to them, simply because they weren't that omnipresent. You always knew where you had those monsters. They were never that disgusting. They were never that unpredictable. And the reason that Pyramid Head sort of became the mantle that he did was that you never fully understood him. If you go into some of the analysis of exactly what Pyramid Head is, this idea that he is a representation of James's guilt, it sort of makes sense why he is the way he is. But you're never comfortable with the character. And whenever he arrives, you're always, just scared. And yeah, I really, really love that game. And what I was trying to recreate with this character is that same sort of unease and discomfort. Now, the game is still in development, so whether or not I'm successful is anyone's guess, honestly, at this point. And it's so much in development that there might be a situation coming down the pike where I just end up going, yeah, sorry guys, it never happened. And I will preemptively apologize if that happens. I don't think it will. But I know how disappointing it is when a game that you were looking forward to never happens. I think I'm going to try something here where I don't do that double line and instead just try and do something a little bit more like a vein. So like an eyeball. I kind of feel like that worked. It just needs to be a little bit thicker. So this was 4, so let's try with 11. That's too much. Let's try with a 6. Yeah, that kind of works. Something that I think most developers have tried at any one given point in their career is overpromising. It happens. It just happens. And there's not really much you can do about it other than apologize and move on. The original Unsafe was very much a case of over promising. And the problem there really became that I simply just didn't have the skill for it yet. And rather than playing to the skills I had, I really wanted to go out and be super provocative and rethinking. And at the time, the version that I'd been working on was something that I had sort of been at idea stage with for so long. Unfortunately. I think that's another thing that you have to realize when you're doing video game development is you're really at your best, your strongest, if you try to not set yourself up. Like, for instance, it's never gonna be great if you try and create a story before you create the gameplay. Most of us have played a lot of games, and that's why we want to make them. And we'll usually start with some really cool, really intricate, really intense world in which there are heroes and villains and witches and all those types of things. And again, that world is super cool. That you can't take that away from the person who's created it, but it's never going to happen if it's a video game. Maybe it's really cool. Maybe it's a really cool book, but a video game needs a... Oh, that was too thick. A video game needs that gameplay. Gameplay is king. It's much easier to develop a story around a type of gameplay than it is to develop a gameplay around a type of story. There are a few genres that call for a lot of gameplay, but for the most part, you are going to shoot yourself in the foot if you try and do gameplay fast. So I'm just going to check how long I've been going with this video. Can I see that? Oh god damn it, 40 minutes. So I think I'm gonna sign off now. That seemed very ranty by the end. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I think I'm gonna try and keep these concept art streamy type videos a little bit more confined as I move forward. I think 40 minutes for a test is fine, but moving forward might not be the best idea. So I hope to see more of you, and clearly you will definitely see more of me.